Welcome to Larry's Library. This week we are taking a look at the Fifth Beatle, the Brian Epstein Story. Now, before I get into that, there's probably some people shocked saying he pronounced Epstein wrong. But I didn't. Okay, let's get right into this real quick. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this pronunciation, but I do want to get it out of the way. I will link a much longer, more detailed version of the explanation. It's about 10 minutes long. Fantastic video. I will put a link to that in the description. So check that out if you want a more deep dive, in-depth look at is it Brian Epstein or Brian Epstein. Now, if you look at archival footage of the Beatles themselves talking about their friend and manager Brian Epstein, they all say Epstein every time. John Lennon says Epstein many times on film. Marianne Faithfull says Epstein. Lots of people say Epstein, and guess what? They're all wrong. Yep, the Beatles pronounced their manager's name wrong, and he never bothered to correct them insofar as history has told us. It goes like this. The writer of this book, let me see if let me get his name right, Vivek Tiwari. He studied the life of Brian Epstein exhaustively for 10 to 12 years. Well, as he was writing this awesome graphic novel. Spoiler, it is awesome. And he actually befriended and talked to many people that knew Brian Epstein. Many of the family members he spoke to and became friendly with over the time he was interviewing them for this book. And the entire family, all of them, preferred Epstein. That's how they said it. The grandmother of the family, his grandmother, said the name is Epstein. And that is the correct pronunciation, and she was actually a little bit miffed that people got it wrong. Now, Brian Epstein himself, being the consummate businessman, the wheeler-dealer extraordinaire, expert at navigating all of the things that had to be navigated to make to make business happen, you know, and to get these artists out there and get the exposure they needed. He wasn't going to mess everything up by saying, "Oh, you pronounced my name wrong." So they said Epstein, and he just went with it. So, officially, it is Epstein. So, there you go. With that out of the way, let's get to this awesome graphic novel. Now, the edition I have here is the oversized hardcover. In the B-roll, I'll try to put some footage showing it against a Marvel Omnibus versus a standard comic book and maybe a couple other editions that you're probably familiar with so you can get a feel for the size of this thing. But it is a beautiful, nice, big edition. The binding quality on it is fantastic. It's a great hardcover, like I said. The pages are very, very thick. So thick that at times I was thinking the two pages were stuck together, but they were not. It's almost a cardstock-like material that they're using for these pages. It's just lovely. The only way it could be better is if it wasn't so glossy, but, you know, minor quibble, but it's very nice. So this originally came out in 2013. And this edition is published by M Press, the letter M Press. I had never heard of that, but apparently it is a Dark Horse imprint of some kind that I never heard of. But yeah, the list on it is $49.99, and it still seems to be in print. And don't be a chump. Don't pay $49.99. Get it from in-stock trades, where it is still available for $31.99. Much better deal. But this one has 168 pages. Now, before this came out, since this has come out, more recently, very recently, there was a 10-year anniversary edition come out, and it's a trade paperback, and it adds about 8 or 9 pages to the page count of some more supplementary material. So, and it is much cheaper. I'm not sure what the price was, maybe 20 bucks, like that. So if you want to go that route, you can certainly get it as a trade. So as I mentioned before, the writer on this is Vivek Tiwari. And he, I think, was better known, before this anyway, for producing some Broadway plays. He was involved with, I think he did Green Day's American Idiot, and I think he did Jagged Little Pill, which I assume is based on Alanis Morissette's album. I'm guessing. Never seen it, but... Now, when I did some research on this guy's background and this book, I did see a lot of references to a movie version coming out, and then later that was changed to a limited series for television, and then that never came out. So it could be that this is something that's in developmental hell, and maybe eventually we will see it transpire. I sure hope so, because I would love to see that. That would be awesome. The artist on this one is Andrew G. Robinson. And as far as I can tell, he did the bulk of all the art, almost all of it. The painting, the drawing, the inking, the penciling, and then it says with Kyle Baker. And from what I'm able to determine, the only parts Kyle Baker did was the very, very cartoony stuff that looks very much like some of the old Beatles cartoons. If you've seen any of that, the Beatles animations, this is definitely in that style, the parts that Kyle Baker did. But the majority of it is by Andrew G. Robinson, and it is breathtaking. It is awesome. It is the perfect mix of slightly cartoony, but yet hyper-realistic at the same time, insofar as like the faces and the backgrounds. And I mean, it's very hard to explain, but hopefully the beautiful scans that I'm running here are going to just illustrate it better than I can describe it. Yeah, I don't think I'd ever seen this guy's art before, at least not that I recall, but it is great. I really, really love this. Highly recommend it. This tells the story of the Beatles' manager, their first manager. As I said, Brian Epstein. It's really his story, but you're brought into very early Beatles lore and the history of the times and of the Beatles and a little bit about their music. But mostly this is a story of Brian Epstein guiding the Beatles and getting them on the world stage, getting them to America, getting them on Ed Sullivan, and on like that. But it's also a personal story about Brian Epstein and all the stuff he went through, his addictions and his trials. And it's a lot of things are brought up that I knew nothing of. I mean, I didn't know a thing about all this stuff. Some really dark historical stuff, and I'm glad I did learn these things. But it is quite disturbing if you don't already know. Brian Epstein was a gay man, and he was an Englishman. And here's the thing that blew me away, which I didn't know this. I mean, I knew there was rampant gay bashing and, and prejudice against gays and all that. I mean, I grew up during all that, but this was an era before I was born. And the thing about it is, what really struck me or blew me away is I didn't know this. You could be put in jail in the 60s in Great Britain, in the UK, if you were gay. It was illegal to be gay. I mean, how mind-blowing is that, that there was a time that it was actually against the law to be a certain sexual persuasion. It's insane. And that's what that man lived through. And the doctors even had him on various medications, which the book doesn't say what these things were, but they were pills for his anxiety. And the doctor always says something like, and they'll help you with your how's he put it, with your homosexual tendencies. It will help you repress those homosexual urges. So be sure to take your pills, And they had him on these things. And he was also, I think, on a lot of sleeping pills and all kinds of anxiety meds. And he was always taking this stuff. And at the same time, he was a brilliant manager. I mean, and he tried hard to get the Beatles the best deals they could get. And when he didn't succeed in that, when he found out some licensing deal was kind of screwing him over, I mean, he really just, he hated it. He hated to be defeated. And it was rare that he did get defeated. And when he did, he really blamed himself. And I think he even recouped some of the money out of his own, out of his own share, just to make sure the Beatles were not screwed. So it's a fascinating story, and if you're a Beatles fan, you're going to want to read this for sure. But if you're a fan of any kind of great comic book art, I mean, look at this. This is one to have for sure, and one to be experienced. I love this. I would love to see this on a screen, a big screen or a small screen or whatever. I would love to see this as a video, as a documentary, and I'm hoping that it eventually does make it to that. But meanwhile, we have this gorgeous graphic novel to enjoy, and yeah, it's great. Yeah, I'm glad I got to learn about this fascinating man and a fascinating life that he led. Yeah, he went through some shit. The story's told in a very unique way. At certain times, there's some sequences you're not sure if it's in his head, if he's dreaming, if he's having some kind of a trip, and that just adds to it. But somehow it works. It works really well. What I would like to see is I would love to see the same team take on the next era of the Beatles, in the Beatles' career and the Beatles' lives, you know, after Brian Epstein's death. You know, it could be sort of a sequel to this. I'm not sure what they would call it, but I would be there for it for sure. Yeah, I loved it. I can't recommend this enough. Easy 10 out of 10 for me. Hope you love taking a quick look at this. Yeah, I could go in more about the story, but I don't want to have spoilers here. I mean, you know, you may already know some of the details of Brian Epstein's life, but I certainly did not. Anyway, I hope you liked this. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Come back for more, and I'll see you next time.